I'd only been working at the movie theater for about a month when she started. At first, she seemed nice, always talking about how excited she was to start college and study criminal justice. The irony of that still makes me laugh sometimes. I was still learning the ropes of the concession stand, perfecting the popcorn to butter ratio, memorizing combo prices, and dealing with the weekend rushes when everyone wanted their nachos 5 minutes ago. After about 4 to 5 months, strange things started happening. Money began disappearing from everyone's cash drawers at the end of shifts. Everyone except mine, since I've been moved to ticket checking and wasn't handling cash as often. Mysteriously, her drawer always seemed to have extra money after her shifts. I didn't connect the dots right away. The general manager, a no-nonsense woman who ran a tight ship, started implementing more frequent drawer counts and having managers observe cash handling more closely. Everyone felt the tension, but nobody had solid proof of what was happening. Then came the weekend of the big movie premiere. The theater was packed with costumed fans, excited kids, and lines snaking through the lobby. I was pulled back to concession to help with the rush, floating between registers to restock supplies, grab extra cups, or help wherever needed. After the main rush died down, I was covering breaks for my co-workers. The entitled woman was covering for another female co-worker who was on break. When that co-worker returned, I noticed something odd. The entitled woman immediately opened her register drawer and started counting money, completely ignoring the customers waiting in line. She counted the bills over and over, as if making sure she had taken enough. The general manager noticed too. She cleared her throat to get the entitled woman's attention, but she was too focused on her counting. I had to call the waiting customers over to my register. The general manager walked over to her and asked if everything was okay. The entitled woman said she was fine and had just gotten distracted. Her eyes kept darting to her drawer. The general manager seemed skeptical but walked away. As soon as she was out of earshot, the entitled woman's fake smile dropped. She complained about the general manager always sticking her nose into everyone's business and not respecting personal space. She said she wasn't stealing money, just counting her cash. I was shocked by her sudden attitude change. Before I could say anything, my shift manager came over and told me I could clock out since my replacement would be arriving soon. I went to tell the general manager about what I'd heard, but she was busy with another manager and just gestured for me to leave my drawer on the counter. A week later, I was working concession with another co-worker. We were chatting about upcoming movies when the entitled woman walked in for her shift. Within minutes, the general manager called her into the office. My co-worker perked up and said the entitled woman was finally going to get in trouble. When I asked why, my co-worker told me that the entitled woman was caught on camera stealing cash from everyone's drawers, especially from the girl who worked weekends. I said I didn't know because I hadn't been scheduled to work for the past few days. Before we could continue, the office door opened. The general manager, shift manager, and security walked the entitled woman to the locker room to collect her things. Her face wasn't remorseful or embarrassed. She looked annoyed, like losing her job was just an inconvenience. Later, the general manager pulled me aside and told me that they had suspected the entitled woman for weeks but needed solid proof. She mentioned that the maintenance manager had tried blaming me at one point, despite me not even working in the box office where most of the thefts occurred. The general manager said they knew it wasn't me because I was too honest and straightforward to take something from someone else's drawer. She told me they had installed hidden cameras after too many drawers came up short and finally caught the entitled woman reaching into other people's registers when they stepped away. A couple months later, I was at a buffet with my family when I spotted a familiar face serving tables. It was her, the entitled woman who thought she could steal from her co-workers. She kept her head down when she saw me, avoiding our table completely. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. Her punishment was already playing out, from studying criminal justice to serving plates with downcast eyes, afraid of being recognized by people who knew what she'd done. I doubt she'll be putting fired for theft on her college applications. Some people really think they're entitled to whatever they want, including the money others worked hard to earn. I've been working at the local hospital for almost a decade now. Between 12-hour shifts and being on call most weekends, my free time is practically non-existent. When I do get a moment to run errands, the last thing I need is someone making it take longer than necessary. That Tuesday started like any other day off. A list of errands that would probably take until dinner to finish. The grocery store was my last stop and I needed to fill up my tank before heading home. Our town only has 3 gas stations, and the one at the grocery store usually has the best prices. I pulled into the station around 4:30 p.m., right in the middle of rush hour when everyone's getting off work and stopping for gas. There were about 8 pumps, and every single one had a car using it or waiting. I sighed and got in line behind a minivan, accepting I'd be waiting a while. After about 5 minutes, a pump opened up. I started to pull forward when a red sedan zoomed in from another line and took the spot. I was annoyed but figured it wasn't worth getting upset about. Another 5 minutes passed, and the same thing happened again, this time with a pickup truck cutting me off. I tapped my steering wheel impatiently and mumbled about common courtesy. 15 minutes had passed, and I was still waiting. Finally, I saw the minivan in front of me finish and pull away. I started moving toward the open pump when I noticed a large, shiny SUV racing toward the same spot from the side. The SUV was moving fast, way too fast for a gas station. I slowed down knowing this wasn't going to end well. The driver, a woman with large sunglasses and blonde hair, made direct eye contact with me through her window. As our eyes met, she laughed and made a dismissive hand gesture. But while she was busy mocking me, she wasn't watching where she was going. The SUV slammed right into the gas pump with a horrible crunching sound of metal on metal. The front of her expensive vehicle crumpled against the pump, which thankfully didn't tip over but definitely took damage. I muttered an exclamation of shock under my breath. I sat there for about 3 seconds before my medical training kicked in. My first thought was to check if she was hurt, but my second thought was about what could happen if gas started leaking around a damaged pump. The woman climbed out of her SUV, seemingly unhurt but livid. She hadn't even bothered to turn off her engine. She angrily shouted about how ridiculous it was and asked who would put a pump in that location. She looked around as if searching for someone to blame. When her eyes landed on me, still sitting in my car, her expression changed from anger to embarrassment and then back to anger. I decided this was my cue to leave. I put my car in reverse and backed away slowly. In my rearview mirror, I could see the gas station attendant running out with a fire extinguisher. Other customers were backing away too, some even driving off without finishing their gas. The woman yelled after me, telling me not to drive away. She insisted that I had witnessed the incident and claimed it wasn't her fault. I didn't stop. I got out of there as quickly as possible, worried the pump might catch fire or worse. As I drove away, I saw the station manager on the phone, probably calling the police or fire department. The woman was gesturing wildly, pointing at where I had been moments before. I ended up going to the more expensive gas station across town. When I got home, I kept checking the local news, half expecting to hear about a gas station explosion, but thankfully, there was nothing. The next morning, I drove past the grocery store gas station on my way to work. The pump was completely gone, just yellow caution tape around the spot where it had been. I never found out exactly what happened after I left, but I did hear from a coworker who shops at that store that they're now reviewing their security footage more carefully and considering a new traffic flow pattern for the pumps. I don't know what happened to the woman or her fancy SUV, but I bet she's having a hard time explaining to her insurance company why she drove straight into a gas pump. I was shy and kept to myself. I lived in a small apartment in the city with little personal space. When I saved enough to move into a decent complex with parking spots, I was happy. It had assigned parking and a small community garden area for residents. After working long hours as a hospital technician, I enjoyed tending my tomatoes and herbs. I'd lived there for about 6 months when I met her. I'll call her Garden Lady. I was kneeling by my garden plot on a Saturday morning when a shadow fell over me. Garden Lady asked me what I thought I was doing. I looked up to see a woman in her 50s, hands on her hips, wearing gardening gloves and a hat. I replied that I was tending my vegetables and asked if everything was okay. Garden Lady told me that no, it wasn't. She said this was her section of the garden, and all this area belonged to her. I was confused. The property manager had shown me which plots were available, and I've been gardening in this spot for months. I told her I thought there was a misunderstanding and that the manager had assigned me this plot when I moved in. Garden lady dismissed what I said. She told me the manager didn't know what they were talking about. She said she'd lived here for 8 years and had always used this entire side of the garden. She said my plants were taking up space she needed for her roses. She pointed to some rose bushes nearby, which were beautiful, but not in my plot. I told her that this was my space. I suggested we talk to the manager together to clear things up. Garden lady cut me off. She said she didn't have time for this. She told me she was hosting the neighborhood garden club next weekend and needed to expand her rose display. She told me to move my tomatoes to that empty corner, saying we wouldn't have problems if I did. She pointed to a shaded area where nothing would grow well. She walked away like the matter was settled. I'd worked hard on my garden and knew I was right. Instead of moving my plants, I checked with the property management office. The next day, the manager confirmed the plot was mine and garden lady had no claim to it. He showed me the garden map with all the assignments and said he would speak with her. 2 days later, I came home from work to find all my plants uprooted and in a pile. In their place were several rose bushes. I took photos and called the manager, who said he couldn't do anything until morning. That night, garden lady knocked on my door with a smile. She mentioned that she noticed I called the office. She said it was a shame about my plants. She suggested I should listen when someone with more experience gives advice. I told her she destroyed my garden, which was vandalism and against the lease. She asked me to prove it was her. She said no one saw anything. She asked who they would believe, the newcomer or the resident who hosted the community garden club for years. She had a point. I hadn't seen her do it, but something in me snapped. I told her she was right that no one saw her destroy my garden, and no one would see what happens next. Her smile dropped. She asked if that was a threat. I told her it wasn't a threat, but a promise that I don't take orders from people who don't know how to park. Her face went pale. Garden lady parked her SUV diagonally across her spot and into mine. She'd been warned by management, but never changed. She asked what I was talking about. I said nothing and wished her a good evening. I closed the door and made a plan. The next morning I went to the management office with photos of my destroyed garden, screenshots of the garden plot assignments, and the lease, highlighting penalties for vandalism. I asked for security footage. They had cameras that caught garden lady in the act. The manager was angry because she'd done similar things to other residents who were afraid to report her. Within a week, garden lady was warned and had to pay for replacing my plants. She was put on probation with possible lease termination if she harassed others. The real win came at the next garden club meeting. Neighbors who heard what happened invited me. Garden lady looked uncomfortable as everyone admired my new garden plot with a fence. Someone even said my tomato growing was impressive for a beginner. The property management installed marked dividers between all garden plots and parking spaces with an announcement about respecting boundaries. Garden lady avoided me after that and eventually moved out when her lease ended. My garden did well, and I won a small award from the local Urban Gardening Association. I worked at a mid-sized marketing agency. The pay was decent, the work was challenging, and I wanted to prove myself. For the first year, everything went smoothly. I got positive feedback, learned new skills, and built my reputation. Then the company hired him. From day one, something felt off about my new colleague. He had a slick way of talking, always dropping industry jargon and mentioning clients he'd supposedly worked with. Our co-workers seemed impressed, but I noticed how he rarely contributed anything real in meetings, just repackaged what others had said moments before. At first, I thought maybe I was being too judgmental, but then I started noticing a pattern. He would hover around other people's desks, asking questions about their projects. Days later, in team meetings, he'd bring up those exact ideas as if they were his own. My cubicle neighbor once told me that he'd seen how this colleague had taken his entire social media strategy and presented it as his own. He told me he had emailed him that exact plan just a week earlier. I'd shake my head, but since it wasn't happening to me directly, I tried to stay out of it. I had my own work to focus on, and office politics wasn't my thing. That changed when our agency landed a major potential client, a national retail chain looking to revamp their entire digital presence. This was huge for us, and my boss assigned me to lead the pitch presentation. For 3 weeks, I lived and breathed this project. Late nights, early mornings, weekend work, I poured everything into creating the perfect presentation. I researched their competitors, analyzed their current strategies, and developed a plan that would transform their online presence. The day before the big meeting, I had just finished the final slides when he stopped by my desk. He said my work looked great. Then he offered to look it over, saying he had some time and fresh eyes might catch something I'd missed. I was tired and still had to prepare data sheets for the meeting. Plus, I had another urgent task to finish before the end of day. I agreed his help would be useful and sent him the file. I asked him to let me know if he spotted anything that needed fixing. He nodded and walked away. I thought nothing of it. The next morning I rushed to the conference room, coffee in hand, ready for this presentation. But when I opened the door, my stomach dropped. There he was, standing at the head of the table, clicking through my slides, speaking to the clients and my boss. I froze in the doorway. The title slide that had previously read Digital Transformation Strategy, prepared by me, now simply said Digital Transformation Strategy. My name was gone. I quietly took a seat trying to process what was happening. He continued through the presentation using my words, my research, my ideas, all without mentioning my involvement. The client representatives were nodding along. My boss looked pleased. I sat there trying to maintain my composure. This was a major client, and causing a scene wouldn't help anyone. Then came the technical questions. The client's chief technology officer leaned forward. The CTO asked about our integration approach, questioning how it would work with their legacy inventory system. He wanted details about the specific API considerations. He hesitated for the first time. He stammered a vague response about API integration, following standard protocols for legacy systems and using middleware solutions. He was giving vague, meaningless answers. He hadn't done the research. I had. I knew how to answer this question because I'd spent an entire day discussing technical specifications with their IT department last week. That was my moment. I straightened in my chair and spoke. I said I could explain the details since I was actually the one who put the presentation together. The room went silent. Everyone looked at me. The client CTO asked what I meant. My boss asked if I had created the presentation. I nodded. I said I had created it and had been working on the proposal for 3 weeks. I mentioned that I had spoken with their IT team the previous Thursday about their inventory system. I stood up and moved to the front of the room. He stepped aside. I asked if they'd mind me addressing their question about the API integration. For the next 45 minutes, I walked through every aspect of the presentation, answering questions with detail. The client team directed their questions to me, ignoring him as he sat in his chair. When the meeting ended, the clients seemed excited about working with us. They shook my hand. The client CEO told me they would be in touch soon and said my understanding of their needs was what they were looking for. As everyone left, my boss asked me to stay behind. My boss said we needed to talk about him. I started to apologize for speaking up, saying I couldn't just sit there while he was taking credit for my work. My boss told me not to apologize. She said this wasn't the first time this had happened, but it would be the last. She thanked me. The next day, my boss called a department meeting. Without naming names, she announced a new policy about properly crediting work and collaborative projects. Then she looked at him and said this was necessary because of recent incidents, making it clear this was a warning. He never tried it again, not with me or anyone else. 2 months later, the retail chain became our biggest client, and I got a promotion.